Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is going to be my review of Cyclades, a game designed by Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Mablanc, put out by Matagot, and this is going to be the first of the games in the trilogy of Cyclades, Kemet, and Innis. And this is going to be the start of a series of reviews that I'm slowly doing of going through all of my favorite games. I'm new to the content creation scene, all things considered, and I have years of games behind me, years of games that I love, that I feel it's almost criminal to have so many games in my top games of all time and then to not actually have dedicated videos on them. And so I'm slowly going through those, slowly catching up, and going through this in my Patreon, having my patrons select which games get reviewed first. And Cyclades is going to be the first of those, winning the most recent vote. And this is an area control game, a hybrid area control game, that genre I love so much, combining the fighting and the dice rolling and the powers and the abilities that define the Ameritrash genre with the elegance that defines the Euro genre. That instead of having pure dice rolling, you're going to have various mechanisms from action selection to auctioning in the case of Cyclades, to drafting, combining those two worlds of attacking area control and Euro mechanisms into games that I tend to love, and Cyclades is no exception. This one, I don't know exactly where it is in my top whatever, but it's pretty high up there. This game is going to combine primarily at its core, it's going to combine an auction round in which you choose at the beginning of every single round which god you're going to get the powers for this round, and that god is going to define how your entire round plays out. Perhaps you take Ares and suddenly you can recruit troops, you can add new certain war-based buildings, and of course you can move around the map and attack other gods. Perhaps you take Athena, who is, well, fairly boring, but can help you win the game because you will need all four buildings of the various gods in order to actually win the game. As well as the fact that Athena gives you access to philosophers, another way to get closer to the end game for yourself. Or perhaps you take Zeus. Zeus will give you options to buy more cards, to get discounts on the bidding, as well as discounts on the creatures that come out. Zeus gives you that little bit of background to building up a better tableau as the game progresses. And then finally, or not finally, almost finally, there's Poseidon, who's going to give you access to the navy. You can recruit navy units as well as move around on the board with your ships. And then lastly, stuck to the board that I can't pick up, the very last god is going to be Apollo, who gives you a cornucopia, a permanent state of extra income in the game, as well as giving you an actual coin instead of having to bid for that favor, because this is where part of the fun of the game comes in. In order to get each god, you are going to be bidding on the track. You're going to say, well, I'm going to go, 3 on Ares, on Zeus. And someone else can go, you know what, I'm going to go 2 on Poseidon. And then someone else says, I'm going 5 on Zeus. At which point you have to immediately pick up your token and bid on a different track. You cannot immediately outbid on the same track you were just outbid on. So I go to Poseidon for 3, and then someone else goes back to Athena for 2. Someone finishes off with Ares for 3, and boom. The game is now set and you move towards the next state. And every single round, one person will always be stuck with Apollo. So there's always going to be someone building up that little bit of extra income, as well as not spending their money this round and therefore prepping for a better next round. Once you have all your gods decided, once you have bid through that, you will take turns in the order that the gods came out, because part of the things I didn't talk about yet is every single round, these gods are going to be different. You're going to shuffle them up and reorder them every single round. So when you're bidding, you're not just deciding which abilities you have access to, but you're also deciding the turn order of those abilities, which has drastic effects on the game. You may well be prepped to get Ares and take over a military conquest on the board, but that won't get you very far if Poseidon is actually earlier and their fleets come sweeping in, taking out any chance for you to actually invade their island. The turn order in this game is just as impactful as the actual gods and their abilities themselves. But once you do go through your turn, you will have the option to do a few things depending on which god you got. You have the option to buy many of these cards from this deck full of different creatures and heroes and abilities that do different things, from destroying other people's buildings, swapping buildings of your own, using the Pegasus to invade any isle on the board. A whole host of abilities will come through those cards that line up, and it will take a system of being 4, 3, or 2 coins, progressively getting cheaper and cheaper as the cards are bought or not bought. So that's one of the things you can do on your turn. Additionally, every single god, like I said already, to some extent will give you the actions you can take. As Ares, you can recruit units for an increasing amount of gold per unit. You can build one of the 4 types of buildings, and you can actually do all the invasions that are the military aspect of this game. Athena, lets you buy philosophers as well as the white buildings, which have no real impact but are one of the 4 buildings you will need to build up your metropolises. And then you have Zeus, who will give you access to priests. Those priests will give you a discount on bidding. For each priest, you pay 1 less than you would have otherwise paid for that bidding on this track, which means if you go heavy Zeus early in the game, you can set up a situation where it's hard for other players to really get what they want against you because they will have to pay a premium that you don't. Additionally, as Zeus, you can buy purple buildings, which will give you a discount, temples as it were, which will give you a discount on those various creatures up there. So again, more about the powers and abilities and setting yourself up to have cheaper access towards other things. And then finally, as Poseidon, you can recruit ships, you can build navy buildings, which are, I don't know what they're called, but the whatever they are, you can build those navy buildings that will give you a +1 die in battle around those buildings, and then of course you can move your ships around the board. Those are going to be the primary core mechanisms of the game. Those interplay of different things are going to be what drives the game towards its end state, and that end state is building true metropolises, or more specifically, owning 2 metropolises, because you can get metropolises through a few different ways. You can get them once you have 4 different types of buildings, you can combine them all into a single metropolis, or you can combine 4 different philosophers, which you get from Athena, into a single metropolis, and finally, possibly the most fun way, you can just simply take over your opponent's metropolis through military might and conquest. Battles in this game are going to be fairly simple. Each unit adds 1 to the strength of the battle, plus you're going to roll a die that has a 0, 2 1s, 2 2s, and a 3 in it. So each player rolls a die, and you add that to your strength, so there is a little bit of an unknown, not a huge D6 level of unknown, but certainly some factor of unknown each battle, and each time a unit will be removed from battle, you can retreat, rinse, repeat, go at it again and again until someone wins the battle. That is Cyclades. That is the game. There's an economy built in the various aspects of the fact that different islands you control, as well as different trade points around the board, will earn you more money. But balancing the earning of money, the spending of it on gods, the getting different abilities from the cards, and using that to drive towards an endgame where you, and only you, own true metropolises is what this game is all about. And this game is so much fun. To begin with, the bidding. I absolutely love the bidding in this game. I like bidding in general. Bidding in general is a mechanic that forces you to decide what something is worth. And it forces all players at the table to decide what something else is worth. And so not only is that that economy of trying to figure out the value of something, but that value will change by person. To you, Ares may only be worth 5 or 6 coins this round, but to me, based on my setup, it may well be worth 9. But the fact that I might get something powerful out of it might mean that it would have been worth 5 to you, but now it's worth 6 and 7, and figuring out that balance of what any given thing is worth is so impactful. And then the fact that you can't immediately outbid on the track you're on leads to this state of where in this game you are constantly bidding on things you don't actually want, so that other players can slowly but surely lock in their place on the board, and then you can eventually get outbid because there's no way anyone is letting you have Poseidon for 2, and that's when you go for Ares at 4, and you figure out that that's when you can actually get what you want at a cheaper price than you would have otherwise paid for it. The back and forth in this game and the bidding is amazing. I believe the bidding is inspired by Amon-Ra. I believe. I haven't actually played Amon-Ra, so I can't say for certain. But nonetheless, the bidding in this game is the first thing that I love the bidding in this game. This is possibly my favorite bidding in any of the games I've played. The combination of the mechanic on its own, as well as what it actually means for the game state, as well as what it actually means for the sequencing, the abilities, and all of that, the way it plays out. Again, it also has powers and abilities. If you've watched my videos, I say this every time, but if you watch my stuff, powers and abilities is one of the things I love, and it's going to have that in this game. Every god brings its own set of powers and abilities to the game that changes up what you can do that round. And then it's going to have the various cards that each give you different options you can do, different special abilities as it were. Maybe you take your income again, maybe you steal someone else's money, maybe you destroy a building, maybe you destroy a troop, maybe you fly across the board, maybe you get one of these monsters and you build up the Kraken and you go boom, 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 destroying a whole bunch of ships in the process. That Kraken is so much fun, as are all the other creatures in this game. There are so many things that just change up a pure, simple game to add more fun and tenseness to it. I like the fact that in this game you are always in it. You may not be someone who looks like they are about to win, but I have seen time and time again people who you thought were in last place actually come in and sweep in for the win. I love the fact that the game allows you to kind of retreat to a little hub of a lone island, getting additional income. They give you a little catch-up mechanic there, but then coming back full force. If you have the right turn, the right sequencing, you can win this game with the combination of everything playing out. I love how in this game no player is truly ever out of the game. I love the puzzle of the game. This is going to be a huge thing for me. I love the timing of everything, the sequencing of everything, the way it really does come down to seeing a pattern of the way things will play out, finding that nuance of how you can take advantage of the game state, of the ordering of the gods, of who's bidding on what, of who's been outbid last turn, and combining all that into a way where you can win the game. It's a puzzle. It really is. The ordering of the gods is so impactful. Like I said, as an example earlier, it's not always enough for you to get Ares. You have to get Ares, but also do so at the time that it makes sense. If Poseidon is earlier, they may cut off your military might. So maybe you actually need to get Poseidon this turn to set that up more importantly, to set up a stronger navy before next turn you get Ares. Finding that sequencing out and knowing that there's creature cards at the top, the various abilities that are going to come from those cards, and how you can use them to your advantage, but it is first come, first serve. Other players will potentially get access to them if they are higher up in turn order. You have to account for all of that. And you have to do all that while spending enough money to earn the god that you want, while leaving enough money over so that you can actually get all the creatures and everything else you want. You have to balance all of this into one simple endgame state of how everything's going to play out, so that ultimately you can drive home for the victory. I love the variable paths to victory. I love how you can go dry Athena, which is kind of boring, but ultimately works in terms of building up the philosophers, getting a metropolis, while other people refuse to pay attention for you because you do not represent any form of military might on the board. I love how you can simply build up a variety of temples, combine it with a few creatures that swap things in or out or do whatever, and again, you can build a metropolis on the board. Or perhaps you just go pure dominating might and take over other people's metropolises because you have enough of a force to do so and they haven't prepped enough to get in your way or stop you. And I love how you can stop people through the pure bidding of the gods. If one player has such a huge degree of military might that they will clearly win the game, you just have to make sure that they don't get Ares next turn. That's fine too. Same with Athena. You may have a metropolis and 2 philosophers, and all you need is 2 more philosophers to win the game. And so suddenly, everyone is now bidding for Athena when they didn't care at all before. That bidding can lock people down so that they can't win when they otherwise are dominant in what they are trying to do. I love those variable paths and the variable ways of locking it. Additionally, I like the modularity the expansions bring to the table. There are a whole host of expansions, and I've had this game for years. I've had all the expansions for years, and I haven't even played through all of them yet. There's things like Heroes and other decks of cards. There's the huge expansion, Cyclades Titans, which totally changes up the game state, fixes some problems, adds some of its own. There are various different ways for you to play this game, from the base game to these expansions to all the modules therein. And yet there's still things about Cyclades that I don't love. There's a reason it's not in my top 10, but rather in my top 20. I think it's in my top 20, not top 10. But nonetheless, those things are going to be a fewfold. First of all, is this game, and a lot of games have this aspect, but I think Cyclades has it worse than others, which is this idea that you pull back the winner and you do it again and again and again until finally someone else breaks through for the win. I don't love that in games. Obviously, games to any degree will have a degree of pushing back the leader, pulling back the leader, and trying to stop them from winning. But in Cyclades, more so than others, it often feels, I think it's because of the bidding mechanism, I think it more often feels like, okay, great, they were going to win and we stopped them. They were going to win and we stopped them. And so finally, it got to my turn to win and you couldn't stop me anymore because you ran out of money. Remember how a minute ago I mentioned you can outbid on Athena just to stop the person who was clearly going to win from winning? You could. But then next turn, I might win because everyone else expended their money stopping someone else. Cyclades does have it to a degree that sometimes you feel like you won because other players had simply expended their capital, their resources, their time, their units, whatever it is, stopping others when it finally gets to you and you break through for the win. Additionally, it can sometimes feel, and this is kind of tied in, it sometimes feels like the win sneaks in. Sometimes in Cyclades, you feel like you're prepping for whatever, who knows, 5, 6 turns left in the game, whatever it is, and suddenly someone kind of just gets a win in. Sometimes that can happen because you're only playing to 2 metropolises, and because it is a puzzle of seeing the various factors of the way they tie in together, sometimes the win can kind of sneak in this game. I would say Cyclades, to me, has one of the most amazing game experiences, but between those 2 critiques, to me, it kind of has a slightly weak endgame to the game. And then lastly, and this is something that I don't know if other people feel, but I know I certainly do, Athena as a goddess is so ridiculously boring. She has her place in the game and she does work in terms of driving that win forward. Those philosophers certainly do mix things up. But Athena is such a boring way to win. It's all about the victory point style of winning as opposed to the doing other things to win style. As whenever you go for Athena, you're getting stuff that will help you win, but none of the in-game fun associated with it. I kind of wish there was another god or goddess to replace Athena to somehow still keep a different balancing aspect of the game, just being less boring. In every single game we've played, Athena tends to be the least sought after character, which does work. It works in the sense that means other players aren't paying as much to get her, and therefore you can actually go for the Athena faction and drive home the balancing of the game, and yet it works. Yet it's a little boring in its actual implementation. As far as things I can see other people not liking, sometimes in this game, you can be stomped on. Now again, the catch mechanics in this game are pretty solidly well done. I think you always have a chance of playing the game. But sometimes, you have 5 trade ports set up, you have a few islands, and people just stomp on your units, and now suddenly your income of 9 gold a turn or whatever it is down to 2 a turn, and you're struggling to make things work. Sometimes in Cyclades, you can be stomped on, your units can be exterminated, your hold on islands and trading posts can be exterminated, and sometimes you can feel like you don't actually have a chance of winning. Now I believe you generally do, because as soon as that happens, you are no longer a target, and all it takes is 1 or 2 turns for you to build up what you need to put yourself back in a position where you are still a competitor in this game. And yet sometimes, it can still be anticlimactic even if you are still in the game. The dice in combat is going to be another thing, because I don't mind it, because it kind of works and it's not overly swingy, but at the end of the day, you can walk into a combat, I can roll a 0, you can roll a 3, and previously my boost of 2 troops over yours is suddenly gone, and suddenly that edge is out the door. So the dice in combat do represent some sort of stake of unknown in the combat. It does represent a degree of not knowing how things will play out. But at the end of the day, it can still be frustrating when you have that swinginess in combat. It provides epic moments of, I can't believe this just happened. But those epic moments come at the cost of someone's well-placed strategy failing to the luck of the dice. Now again, the balance is not terrible with a 0, a 3, 2 1s and 2 2s. Odds are you're going to be falling more into that middle range of having a 1 versus a 1 or a 2 versus a 1 or something along those lines. And you can, the general idea or goal is don't walk into combat with the edge of 1 troop, because you probably won't win it. But at the same time, it does provide a potential degree of swinginess that others may not like. And then finally, the last thing I can see others not liking, which it doesn't bother me and I'll explain why shortly, is the Pegasus one. The Pegasus win is the idea that one of these cards in the deck is the Pegasus. One of those cards simply represents the fact that you can pick up all your troops from one island, fly to another, and every single aspect that I mentioned until now about how you can stop people from winning, from just outbidding Ares, locking down the board game state, all those balances that the game sets up with the snap of the fingers and winning of the Pegasus, those balances are out the door, and suddenly someone can win the game with 1 creature card. And I understand that. Combine that with the cycling aspect that Zeus has, something I didn't touch upon, but Zeus can pay 1 money to cycle the various creature cards again and again until they get to that Pegasus. And so it can shift up the game state and be frustrating for people when that happens. And I would say usually, if the Pegasus is out and it's available to buy, then you have to take that into account in the bidding process. And if the Pegasus is not out, you have to take into account that someone might win Zeus with 10 coins up their sleeve and be able to do that. There are just still other factors. I warn people about them when I teach them the game, but it doesn't actually bother me. It's just one more thing to be cognizant of when you play this game. As far as my final thoughts on Cyclades, at the end of the day, I mean, I said this in the beginning, this is a series of reviews on some of my favorite games, and so don't expect much in the way of apologies for how much I like them, but I love Cyclades. I adore this game. It adds to that area control, fighting, hybrid style of game that I have, and it does so with this bidding mechanic that I think none of the others that I love have it. Drafting we have, powers and abilities, card tableaus, all these other things we have, or I have in my collection, but bidding, I don't think I have that in any of my other area control games. And it combines that. It features that area control behind these other mechanisms. The economy, the bidding, the abilities, the auctions, the timing of different events, of sequencing. All those things coalesce together into a single game that I adore what it does. The expansion Titans, which is not what I'm reviewing today, but the expansion Titans will fix some of those things. It will change up that endgame, and I think it improves drastically the endgame of Cyclades in the sense that it gives you enough other things happening in the game that you don't really have those complaints of pulling back the leader or a sour endgame. I don't like the board as much in Titans, which is why I find I tend to play both Titans and the base game about 50-50, but both of them are so much fun. But really, the puzzle of the game is so solid to me. The last time you played Cyclades was a time in which I sat there towards the end game, all prepped for the win. I had things locked in. I looked at the board state. I was like, I'm pretty sure I got this. I looked around the board. Eventually, I figured out what I needed to do, and I passed my turn. At which point, someone else came in and swept the board. They had a setup of Poseidon in a way that I didn't see, and they completely tanked my ability to win and were able to get their own win in the next game, and I could have stopped it had I just seen the puzzle in front of me. This game very much is a puzzle of seeing the different things and how you have to combine them together to either find the win, block the win, or any of those things. And I've never been so happy to lose a game, because knowing that I had the potential to win, and it's my own lack of seeing things that stopped me, it just means I can do better next time. It means that there's more to this game. There's depth to this game. There is complexity that a game that I've played dozens of times, sometimes I still can't see the pattern and someone else can and can take away the game. I love Cyclades. I appreciate it a lot. Every single expansion. I know Matagot recently did a deluxeified version of Kemet with Kemet Blood and Sand. And while I still don't actually know whether I'll be keeping my original Kemet or the new Kemet, all I'm saying is if they do Cyclades and Innis, I will be there for those Kickstarters because I can't resist the pull. I mean, the idea of having this game with like deluxeified miniatures and more whatever, I'm a sucker for that kind of thing, and I'll be there. Until next time, this has been my review of Cyclades. I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And as always, have a good one.